From Manila to the globe, this is World Newsfeed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our times. Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi. Let's dive into the headlines making a global impact. We begin in Canada, where opposition members in Parliament have called for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to step down. In its closing question period before a month-long winter break, on Tuesday, Canada's House of Commons reverberated with discord as Trudeau's political opponents lambasted the Prime Minister for the recent upheaval and for posting a $62 billion deficit for the year.
What a mess. Yesterday was a gong show at the bottom of a dumpster fire, wrapped up in a cluster. The finance minister resigns, the prime minister hides all day and then has to beg his MPs not to fire him. But the worst news, buried underneath it all, was a devastating gut punch to Canadian taxpayers. A $62 billion deficit smashing through the already insane $40 billion guardrail. Canada is a serious G7 NATO partner staring down the threat of 25% tariffs. We deserve a strong leader with a new mandate. Why not let Canadians decide by calling a carbon tax election?
People are right to be angry. They've got a prime minister who's more interested in protecting his own job than defending Canadians against Trump. We've got a prime minister who's failed to defend workers from rich CEOs that the Conservatives love, who continue to rip off Canadians and drive up the cost of food and homes. The prime minister has failed. For New Democrats, it's always workers first and not CEOs. And not CEOs who the Conservatives want to defend. So will the prime minister acknowledge he has failed? He has to quit.
The Prime Minister has lost the confidence of Canadians, lost the confidence of many of his MPs, and yesterday he lost the confidence of his Finance Minister. And no wonder, because after 9 years, this Prime Minister has broken everything. He's broken our borders, broken immigration, broken housing, and broken the budget. So, when will the Prime Minister just stop? Stop breaking things, acknowledge that he doesn't have a mandate to continue to govern, and call a carbon tax election.
Mr. Speaker, this House voted in confidence of this government just last week on multiple occasions. Mr. Speaker, we have important work to do on behalf of Canadians. We have a very important relationship to manage with the United States at a pivotal time, Mr. Speaker, and that is exactly what this government is focused on doing.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking the opposition House Leader for his heartfelt congratulations on my new role. I want to tell him, Mr. Speaker, and all Canadians, that our government is very proud of the fall economic statement that we made public yesterday. Mr. Speaker, the fall economic statement speaks to growth in the Canadian economy. It speaks to supporting Canadians with serious affordability challenges. It speaks to a declining debt to GDP ratio, the best in the G7. And Mr. Speaker, we haven't finished supporting Canadians, something the Conservatives aren't interested in doing.
The fall economic statement that we tabled yesterday, Mr. Speaker, is about growth, and it's about investing in our business community and in our economy, Mr. Speaker. The accelerated capital cost allowance will ensure that Canadian businesses stay on this side of the border, stay in Canada, that our creation of jobs will continue to increase. 330,000 jobs were created in the last year alone, and these are good-paying jobs, Mr. Speaker. Even accounting for inflation, salaries have risen by 5%, the highest in the G7, Mr. Speaker. We're ensuring that Canadians bring home stronger paychecks and better jobs.
This comes after Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland resigned on Monday amid a policy clash and released a letter salvaging Trudeau's leadership, prompting one of the worst crises since he became Prime Minister in 2015. Hours later, Trudeau held a special meeting with his parliamentary caucus, which already is unhappy with the party's poor performance in the polls. Polls show the Liberals could be crushed by the official opposition Conservatives. Separately, one Liberal parliamentarian said Trudeau would be delusional if he thought he could fight the next election, which is due by October 20th next year. New Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc said Trudeau had heard party mates listen to their concerns and he would reflect on it. When addressing a party fundraiser on Monday, Trudeau made no mention of whether he might step down. A top Russian general was assassinated in Moscow by Ukraine's SBU intelligence service Tuesday in the most high-profile killing of its kind. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, who was chief of Russia's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection troops, was killed outside an apartment building along with his assistant when a bomb hidden in an electric scooter went off. Kirillov is accused by Ukraine of being responsible for the use of chemical weapons against Ukrainian troops. Russia's Security Council said the Ukrainian leadership would face imminent revenge for the killing of a top Russian general.
Despite the fact that the investigation has just begun, our enemies have already rushed to publish information about their involvement. In any case, the investigators must find the killers in Russia, and we must do everything to destroy the patrons who are in Kiev. These patrons are also known. This is the military political leadership of Ukraine. In any case, this is a very sad incident. I propose to honor the memory of our colleague, our comrade.
The incident is qualified as a murder, terrorist act, illegal circulation of weapons and ammunition. Investigators, forensic experts, and operational services are working at the scene. Investigative actions and operational search activities are being carried out aimed at establishing all the circumstances of the crime committed.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, its leader publicly floated the idea of foreign troops being deployed until Ukraine could join NATO. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the urgent strengthening of Ukraine would be the main thing to discuss. He mentioned long-range defense capabilities, allied investment in Ukrainian weapons production, and security guarantees, among other topics. Possibility was first raised by French President Emmanuel Macron in February, but no consensus was reached among European leaders on the matter. Visiting Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said his country, one of Ukraine's staunchest supporters, would do everything in its power to make Kyiv's NATO membership a real possibility.
If it were up to Poland, it wouldn't take more than one day. But you can count on our diplomacy and our actions here. We will do everything we can to make the prospect of NATO membership for Ukraine ever closer. We are aware it's not an easy path.
Effective security guarantees in the future mean NATO, and Ukraine wants to understand from those allies on which it depends when this will happen and how likely it is.
Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump's incoming Ukraine envoy will travel to Kyiv and several other European capitals in early January as the next administration tries to bring a swift end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Sources told Reuters retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, who is set to serve as Trump's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia, is not planning to visit Moscow during this trip. Luigi Mangione, the man accused of shooting dead UnitedHealth Group executive Brian Thompson on a Manhattan street this month, was indicted for murder on Tuesday. New York prosecutors said Mangione was indicted on 11 counts, including first-degree murder and murder as a crime of terrorism. The indictment accused Mangione of murdering Thompson with the intent to, quote, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, end quote. Mangione is currently being held on gun charges in Pennsylvania, where he was arrested last week. Prosecutors said he had indications that Mangione may waive his right to contest his extradition to New York.
This was a frightening, well-planned, targeted murder that was intended to cause shock and attention and intimidation. It occurred in one of the most bustling parts of our city, threatening the safety of local residents and tourists alike, commuters and business people just starting out on their day.
Let me say this plainly. There is no heroism in what Mangione did. This was a senseless act of violence. It was a cold and calculated crime that stole a life and put New Yorkers at risk. We don't celebrate murders, and we don't lionize the killing of anyone. And any attempt to rationalize this is vile, reckless, and offensive to our deeply held principles of justice.
The latest developments from the Middle East in a moment. Stay on BNC for your World Newsfeed. Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. The crypto market climbed over $800 billion. Tech giant Alibaba has announced plans to issue notes. Investors are anticipating a significant downward move for the cryptocurrency. Swift is adding a new chapter to her record-breaking year.
Follow the Money, 10:30 a.m.
Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News channel, always on top.
Hello, good morning. I'm Paulo De Rosario and welcome to Weather HQ. Today's headline. Philbox says 20 volcanic quakes were recorded from Canlaon volcano in the past 24 hours. An agricultural tracking application gets recognized globally for helping Filipino farmers. Copernicus Climate Change Service says 2024 will be the hottest year on since the records began.
I think most of us understand the value that forests provide in terms of yung oxygen, yung water supply.
Whatever the weather, only here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Good morning, everyone! Wow!
Join Paulo Del Rosario
Let's get you up to speed with some news that you could use right now.
and Asis Carrillo.
Let's start the day right with laughter, good vibes, and big energy to beat the gloominess out of your morning.
And Monique Tuzon.
Join us in the next hour for stories and conversations that matter. May this day be an unforgettable one for you. And here on
It's a beautiful day.
Magandang gabi, ako po si Pinky Webb.
Ako naman si Corina Sanchez Rojas. Simulan na natin ang agenda.
We're not confident with numbers, ma'am. Because impeachment is a legal process and a political activity.
The PSA recently informed us, Mr. Chair, that all non-existent.
We need new warships. It will be provocative and will be seen as an escalation. We don't do that. The Philippines does not escalate tension.
Sa bawat issue, may anggulo. At ang balita, may agenda.
Welcome back to World Newsfeed. The United States is engaged with a number of United Nations bodies to ensure the Syrian people get answers and accountability when it comes to mass graves, detention sites, and torture sites in Syria. The State Department says the administration of President Joe Biden was engaged with the Independent Institution on Missing Persons in Syria, among other UN bodies. An international war crimes prosecutor said on Tuesday that evidence emerging from mass grave sites in Syria has exposed a state-run machinery of death under toppled leader Bashar al-Assad, in which he estimated more than 100,000 people were tortured and murdered since 2013.
A public cemetery here in Damascus, where we heard from a witness who testified in Germany and whom I personally interviewed and we personally worked with for a long period of time with satellite imagery, that at this particular cemetery, where he had been one of the administrators, he was called into service by the government in 2012 in order to begin the mass burial of persons that had been killed in government custody. The largest part of those were individuals that had, of the kind shown in the Caesar photos. Remember, the Caesar photos were taken by a military photographer in a military hospital, where during a 20-month period, at least 11,000 corpses arrived from 5 detention facilities in the Damascus area. The other aspect of this is establishing the truth, because as I indicated earlier, everybody in this country was terrorized by this regime, and every family seems to be affected by a disappearance, and they cry out for answers about what happened to their child. There's still faint hopes that somebody could be found alive.
The head of a UN investigative body has written to Syria's new authorities to express a willingness to engage with them and to travel to Syria to secure evidence that could implicate top officials of the former government. Rebels swept President Bashar al-Assad from power this month, flinging open prisons and government offices and raising fresh hopes for accountability for crimes committed during Syria's more than 13 years civil war. The International Impartial and Independent Mechanism, or IIIM, was set up in 2016 to probe and help prosecute the most serious crimes committed in Syria since 2011. It has already collected 283 terabytes of data and is cooperating with national prosecutors, including teams in Belgium, France, and the United States, on Syria investigations. Petit said that there had been some evidence lost in Syria in the transition, but that it was too early to know the scale.
We have seen, all of us, I think, evidence of loss of evidence or potential evidence, quite clearly. Some of that is normal in any of these situations, and especially at the pace that these events unfolded, quite understandable. What we have, however, also noted with hope, is a stated awareness from the transitional authorities and from Syrian civil society actors of the need to preserve evidence. When you're talking about a government, a state apparatus, who for 14 years used every aspect of that apparatus to commit crimes, you will have a massive amount of documentation left behind.
An inclusive political transition in Syria and a smooth end to sanctions will be key in ensuring the country gets the economic support it needs. That's according to United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Peterson, before the Security Council on Tuesday, after meeting with the country's new Syrian leaders led by the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS. UN Aid Chief Tom Fletcher appealed to all states to ensure that sanctions and counterterrorism measures do not impede humanitarian operations in Syria. The US, Britain, and the European Union and others imposed tough sanctions on Syria after a crackdown by Assad on pro-democracy protests in 2011 spiraled into civil war. But the new reality in Syria has been further complicated by sanctions on Islamist group HTS for its days as an al-Qaeda affiliate.
With just 2 weeks left in 2024, it is less than a third funded, the largest ever funding gap for the Syria response. Now is the time to invest in the Syrian people, to support flexible funds so that we can respond to changing needs. The UN Central Emergency Response Fund has already allocated $32 million to Syria this year. Now is also the time for member states to work on development support to rebuilding Syria, reducing dependence on humanitarian support, and maintaining essential services. A third request. We need all states to facilitate the humanitarian effort, including by ensuring that sanctions and counterterrorism measures do not impede humanitarian operations.
Concrete movement on an inclusive political transition will be key in ensuring Syria receives the economic support it needs. There is clear international willingness to engage. The needs are immense and could only be addressed with broad support, including a smooth end to sanctions, appropriate action on designations too, and full reconstruction.
Meanwhile, a ceasefire between Turkey and the U.S.-backed Kurdish Syrian Forces, or SDF, around the northern Syrian city of Manbij has been extended until the end of this week. Washington brokered an initial ceasefire last week, but it had expired, adding that Washington would like the ceasefire to be extended for as long as possible.
As you know, we worked out a ceasefire for the area around Manbij. That ceasefire has been holding. It had expired. It has been extended into the end of this week, and we continue to engage with the SDF, with Turkey, about a path forward. As we have said publicly, we do not believe it is in the interest of any party to see increased conflict in Syria. We don't want to see any party take advantage of the current unstable situation to advance their own narrow interests at the expense of the broadened Syrian national interest, and those are conversations we're continuing to have with our Turkish allies.
Israeli forces will stay in a buffer zone on the Syrian border until another arrangement is found that will ensure Israel's security. That statement coming from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said on Tuesday from the summit of Mount Hermon, the highest peak in the area inside Syria and near the border with the Israeli-held Golan Heights. So apparently the first time a sitting Israeli leader has set foot so far into Syria. Netanyahu said he had been on the summit of Mount Hermon 53 years ago as a soldier, but the summit's importance to Israel's security has only increased given recent events. Israel seized a swath of southern Syria along the border with the Israeli-annexed Golan Heights in the days after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was ousted by rebels.
We are holding this assessment in order to decide on the deployment of the IDF in this important place until another arrangement is found that ensures Israel's security. This is nostalgic for me. I was here 53 years ago with my soldiers in the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit. The place has not changed. It is the same place, but its importance for the security of Israel has only been underscored in recent years, and especially in recent weeks with the dramatic events that have occurred below us in Syria. We will determine the best arrangement that will ensure our security.
Over the weekend, Syria's de facto leader Ahmad al-Shara said that Israel was using false pretexts to justify its attacks on Syria, but that he was not interested in engaging in new conflicts as the country focuses on rebuilding. Sources tell Reuters Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was on his way to Cairo on Tuesday for talks on a ceasefire in Gaza. Sources also said a Gaza ceasefire deal is expected to be signed in the coming days. Former Israeli hostages who were released in a ceasefire deal a year ago used this opportunity to plead for a comprehensive deal while their loved ones who are still held captive in Gaza. Speaking from Tel Aviv and from their experience of spending about 50 days in captivity, the former hostages said they feared for those still in Gaza.
We must not forget them. I was there, believe me. Forgetting them is killing them anew each day. Forgetting them means forgetting who we were, who we are, and who we want to be. Until Yahya and the last hostage are home, we cannot heal without them. Without them we cannot lift our heads as long as they are there in Gaza. We must bring back Yahya and all the hostages in a comprehensive deal that will close this chapter for all of us and allow healing and recovery to begin.
Winter is here, it's cold, and there it's even colder. Even when conditions in Gaza were supposedly tolerable, it took a long time until we received blankets and warm clothing. The cold, combined with more than a year of nightmare in tunnels under bombardment, is unbearable. Medical research shows that in this cold, without protective layers, the human body cannot survive. We must remind everyone involved in negotiations that we cannot delay. Every day there is one day too many. 438 days and nights are an endless hell.
President Trump, you are a leader who knows how to win, how to turn the tide when all hope seems lost. Now is the moment to prove it. 100 hostages, men, women, children, are still being held in the depths of hell. My partner, my friends, and countless innocent lives are wasting away while the world stands silent. This is your chance, the chance to change history. Step in, end this war, bring the hostage home. No words, no promise, only action. Bring them back, all of them, now.
Efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States to reach a truce in Gaza and secure the release of hostages have gained momentum in recent weeks, but a breakthrough has yet to materialize. The three countries have been leading rounds of talks for over a year, attempting to broker an end to the 14-month-long war in Gaza. Previous rounds of talks have stalled, mainly due to disagreements over Israel's future military presence in Gaza, a deal breaker even after Hamas accepted a version of the proposal that U.S. President Biden introduced in May. Finally, members of the U.S. House of Representatives joined Rabbi Levi Shem Tov for a Hanukkah celebration at the Capitol. On Tuesday, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer led the ceremonial lighting of a menorah. The event symbolizes the enduring spirit of the Jewish community and the values of religious freedom and resilience. The Hebrew holiday marks the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem in the 2nd century BC after a small group of Jewish fighters liberated it from occupying foreign forces. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Catch up with us again tomorrow at 10 when we bring you The World in 30 Minutes only on World Newsfeed. Follow the Money comes next. Keep it here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel, always on time.